Okay.
What's your sound like?
I'm gonna have
You
to.
don't have to do that. I wouldn't even do that. I would just do that. Leave it like that.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Do it like
Yeah.
that. Okay.
I don't even think you need a microphone. I think that's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
They had 4 topics on executive session. We were like, we should have given them an hour.
Mm-hmm. Of an hour. Okay. I don't know. Oh.
So I guess we have to bring it up here at board update?
I don't know where Pam went. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're late.
Yeah.
I call to order the February 24th, 2020 business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in the audience to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the absence of Treasurer Wagner, I need a motion to nominate a board member as Treasurer Pro Tem. I need a motion to nominate.
I'll nominate Mr. Lindy.
And I second that.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
I'd like to make the comment that this feels like ritual hazing.
That's what it is.
Mr. Lindy?
I've been there.
Mr. Lindy will be our Treasurer Pro Tem, and Ms. Hughes will be sitting, sort of taking the attendance and what have you. Ms. Hughes, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates,
Aye.
Ms. Bolton,
Present. Here.
Mrs. Bowers,
Oh, it should be an aye, right?
Yeah, first it's pro tem, and then it's present.
Mr. Lindy,
Present.
Mr. Messer,
What are we voting
Are we doing attendance or are we
We're
voting
calling the roll.
on? For
Yeah.
pro tem?
No, we voted, it was a voice call for Pro Tem. We did that. So
Got it.
now we're on calling the roll call.
Okay.
Thank you.
Present.
Mr. Morowski,
Here.
Ms. Jones.
Here. Thank you. I now need a motion to revise the agenda to add the February 20th, 2020 Finance Committee meetings.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Wonderful. Okay, I need a motion to approve the minutes from the business meeting February 5th, 2020, the special meeting February 5th, 2020, special meeting February 10th, 2020, and the business meeting February 10th, 2020.
So moved. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved as presented. Mrs. Bowers,
Yes.
please present the February 7th Student Achievement Committee meeting report.
Okay, student achievement. We discussed the designing the committee mission, which we all agreed that we will go with the derived district strategic plans goal that's already listed in the strategic plan. We are currently in the process of creating our work plan. What we've done is we're going to align it with the board's bylaws, review the 2019 SAC work plan, and then we also have asked administration to help streamline intentional work and measures within the strategic plan. A draft of that work plan should be available on March 6th at the next Student Achievement Committee. Superintendent Mitchell reported that she will be talking with a representative from the Gilligan's family. We talked about renaming the school for the Gilligan family. We also talking about approaching schools, currently not with a name specific to a person, but that would require some willingness and interest of that school. But there was also the idea of offering that name to a new school that will be discussed at a later point, moving forward for the new schools that are to come. Also, we had, and then superintendent's going to have an update phone call with the Gilligan representative. There was a representative from Bond Hill School, Mr. Alula, from the Ascend program. This is a volunteer program initiative that's focused on improving performance in low-performing students in math. He rolled out his presentation about the program. Currently, he has 14 students, and he desires to increase that number of students in working with the administration and teachers at Bond Hill Academy for next school year. He did leave a copy available in our board office for interested leadership people who want to look more at that program for math. Mr. McDowell talked about the teacher transfer rounds, which actually began today. Committee member Messer inquired about training for teachers, more Montessori training for teachers. And Mr. McDowell explained that right now we have collaboration from Xavier, a contract with Xavier to train our teachers. There was discussion about even an executive MBA fast-track Montessori training. And Mr. McDowell explained that there's a modified program at Xavier currently for that. We had, there was some talk about revising the LSDMC. The board actually discussed that January 22nd and 6th at the board meeting about making sure that that student, there was an assignment for the board to look at students having the right to vote. And SAC today, one of the assignments is that we want to refer that back to the board for discussion under board matters regarding putting that into the policy for students having the right to vote for LSDMC. We also talked about the Walnut Hills test, Iowa testing issues. The reason for the change of the test was that the district assessment tool, the Terra Nova, had been outdated and needed to be upgraded over many years. We've used that in the district. We talked about the initial special college preparatory exam in the 6th grade had a lower number of students passing than the Terra Nova assessment. Administration expressed that the families and students have 2 more attempts per school year. They have 2 attempts per school year to pass the test. And then Mr. Leach had explained that he would bring percentages of the students who passed the test and did not attend Walnut Hills School. Mr. McDowell also about the calendar, there was a explanation that there needed to be change in the calendar for leadership teams regarding professional development days. A deputy superintendent Ahmad explained that the team had met with the calendar committee about the request, and Mr. Messer just wanted to make sure that the teachers were engaged about this new decision. So SAC will recommend the calendar to the board, which I'm recommending today as an assignment for the change for the 2020 regular business meeting. And those are the minutes.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? Ms. Bolton?
Yes, I thought, I just have a couple comments. I didn't see that we're able tonight to talk about the students voting. It's not on the agenda, and we don't have the text of what that change is. It's just a revision of the student guide or whatever we call it. So if we can delay that.
Move that, yes, yep, we
That'd
can
be
move
great.
that.
And then, fascinated, and thank you for bringing up the naming for Governor Gilligan. I had a couple of members of the Clifton community suggest something, and just to make sure we get it on the table. It was during Governor Gilligan's tenure here on the board where the district kind of envisioned this community learning center concept. And so one of the folks, and not one of the folks, but 2 folks and another couple, suggested that the Rawson property that we possess, that is limited as to our use right now, although I think we've asked the general counsel to look into some of the zoning issues about it, particularly the zoning issue that speaks to community learning centers. One of the concepts that was forwarded to me to share with the board was that depending upon the status of the Rawson house and farmhouse and property, could that ultimately become some kind of a foundation house for us, but also a community learning center that might serve more than just a few of the schools. And with the council, city council, having rezoned or done the zoning that accounts for community learning centers, it might take part of that problem. So the suggestion, long and short, was to think about if we keep that property and if it could become a community learning center, it'd be great to name that facility under or for Governor Gilligan. So I just wanted to make sure I got that on the table with the Student Achievement Committee and the board.
Thank you. Ms. Bolton, are you suggesting that that might be an assignment?
Well, I'd like to make an assignment because I kind of think I'm sitting in the governor's seat because I replaced him
Okay.
about 12 years ago.
Just-
But I'd like to, should I
Just-
try to,
What, if you could, in assignments, I just didn't want you to lose that thought.
I will do that.
So that you won't forget it, and
thank you.
we won't forget it. Okay.
Yeah, I need all the help I can get on
Thank
that,
you.
remembering stuff.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Mr. Morosky, please present the February 7th Policy Committee meeting report.
Thank you, President Jones. We kicked off our policy committee meeting on February 7th, talking about our policy 8400, which is safety and security, highlighting the fact that our schools are some of the safest in the country, particularly for an urban district. But also the question to our general counsel and the head of our security was, what, if anything, could we do to ensure that our active shooter drills were as least traumatic as they could be? So we discussed a number of options. There were some teachers there from another school that had voiced some concerns that I know were addressed. And in here, in the minutes, it draws attention to the fact that Mr. Hoying would follow up with folks, and I believe that that happened. So it's outlined in here, our whole discussion. One of the items that had been discussed was perhaps a group of folks, community members, parents, et cetera, maybe work with safety and security to talk about these drills just so people could be more informed, which, not to make an assignment of my own in the reporting of my minutes, but probably makes the most sense to be health and safety if that were to actually happen. So at our next policy committee meeting, Mr. Hoying had discussed putting in some language, whether it's from Ohio Revised Code or just more standardized language into safety policy 8400, just to ensure that it was in literal black and white how the drills would be administered. We had a continued discussion on our policy committee mission statement, and similar to student achievement, we agreed to adopt the mission statement as is written in the strategic plan to design data-informed, customer-focused, and student-centered, user-friendly policies and processes to create efficient and effective systems. We discussed open enrollment in policy 5113. There was a ruling or memo sent from Ohio Department of Education about how we engage with that process, and the memo, which is available in the board office, highlighted 2 key points. That we should establish open enrollment policies are consistently applied and to provide recommendations for enhancements to CPS based on the results of the review. The review did state that the district is following the process, but needs to determine capacity limits for the schools. Obviously, it's easier said than done. The memo is in the board office. Board member Messer asked that all gender bathrooms be placed on the committee agenda, and it was. He highlighted that the equity policy is already in place, and we're happy about that. Just wanted to ensure that we were specifically addressing, quote, what equal looks like regarding the use of all gender bathrooms. Policy 5751, parental married status of students and breastfeeding was updated tonight. Board member Bowers will present our recommendations. It's pretty simple. It just excised whether married or unmarried and added participation in the sentence district. No student who is otherwise eligible to attend school in the district shall be denied participation in educational program, et cetera, solely because of pregnancy. Pretty minimal. Policy 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal education opportunity. This is language that was taken directly from law that says you have to provide any student, employee, contractor, or volunteer who is nursing provided a reasonable break in lactation within the district's facilities. There is a question, it may come up later, and I share the question whether or not that paragraph actually belongs in that policy or maybe somewhere else regarding employment. We can talk about that when we get down to the resolutions. Vendor equity policy, committee member Messer brought up that it would be nice if we advise vendors to sign contracts stating they will not exclude anyone in their hiring practices and provide fair and equal treatment. General Counsel Hoying informed our group he can update policy 6450, which is equal and fair opportunity in contract employment, and policy 2255, which is our equity and excellence in education. As far as assignments, committee member Messer said he would work with Mr. Hoy on that policy, and it'll come back at our next meeting. Couple more, almost done, I promise. Policies related to district facilities and impact neighborhoods. Again, Mr. Messer brought this to the attention of the committee as neighborhood concerns of lights being on at facilities when they weren't being used, and is there sort of a uniform way to address that? Robin Brandon, who's CPS Director of Facilities, noted that there is, but it's not really our policy. It's part of city zoning, and so any certificate of occupancy for district buildings, we have to abide by their rules. So she said she would follow up with that. Policy 0147, we did not have any discussion about. Policy 8515, Ms. Bowers was inquiring about policies for food being brought in from outside the school. Mr. Hoying reported USDA does not mandate any rules for this. That was the extent of most of that discussion. There in our minutes, policy 8510, it's written out what it says regarding competitive food and beverages and when they cannot be sold in the schools. Lastly, it's not in the minutes, but just to let everybody know, our next meeting will not be March 6th because I will be on paternity leave. It will be March 20th at 3:30 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Ms. Bates, present the February 20th Health and Safety Committee meeting.
Yes, thank you. Most of the meeting was concerning a discussion around the school travel plan and also pedestrian safety committees, which ended up being kind of interrelated. We had a guest. It was Mel McVeigh from the city, and she is a planner with the city of Cincinnati, but her responsibility is street safety. And she and Sarah Trimble Oliver gave a report about how the school travel plan is going to be developed. It will be in partnership with the city, and it will be focused around Vision Zero. There will be an advisory team that is forming. I will be part of that as chair of the Health and Safety Committee. And there is currently an executive committee that's meeting to discuss coordination of safety regarding the school travel plan. Ms. McVeigh stated that one of the biggest issues with implementing this plan very safely is that there's not enough enforcement by the police. There's just not enough police to enforce the traffic laws. And we discussed that the city charter had been changed so that cameras could not be used at red lights for violations to be sent to the offenders. And this was changed several years ago. And I know that after attending a meeting in Evanston around this topic where Chief Isaac and City Manager Duhaney were present, they were both very much in favor of changing the charter, even though that may be faced with some unpopularity. So what this committee discussed and what Ms. McVeigh thought would be very, very helpful is if the board took a position on endorsing a potential referendum around around red light cameras in school zones or cameras around school zones to enforce the 20-mile-an-hour limit when children are coming and going. And this may be more palatable to the public. And any proceeds from any of the violations would go towards safety around schools. So one of the assignments that was made, and that will come back to you at our next board meeting in the form of a resolution, is going to be a resolution advocating to the city a referendum for change in the city's charter to allow red light cameras in school zones or around school zones. Included in the resolution will be language to add the funding for the safety grant to be designated to the red light cameras. So that will be coming before you at the next board meeting for discussion and possible vote. The committee work plan is going to be developed by this committee. We asked the superintendent to present us with a calendar for the work plan that aligns with the work of the strategic plan and the administration. So we will discuss that next month. So I present the minutes of the Health and Safety Committee for acceptance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members?
I have,
Ms. Bolton?
thank you. Yeah, I have just a wordsmithing piece in the last sentence of the 4th paragraph, where it says the city is recommending pedestrian-triggered red lights. I think it was Ms. McVeigh that was I don't want her to get in trouble. I don't think that the city has yet recommended a charter change, but she spoke eloquently about that as the best way to provide safety. So I think if we can just change that, so with the correction of Ms. McVeigh was recommending that. And then the other piece to add, I think when we talked to the superintendent about putting the calendar together in the work plan, and it looks like the other committees have done this too, which is great. I think we should add those parts of the strategic plan that have been assumed, if you will, by the Health and Safety Committee. And I mean, I can list those, or we can just, but those were talked about in the meeting, but I don't think they got copied in. Should I repeat those now or just do that later?
Well, that would be part of the work plan, so that would be coming later.
Yeah, but we talked about which ones those were, because in the other committee's minutes, they are citing those strategic items. So it would just be citing it as to what was suggested.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Should I list them that were under, like in the strategic plan? Mm-hmm. Okay, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 3.1, 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 2E, and 3A were the strategies and goals and the measures that would fit within the health and safety. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions and comments regarding the health and safety? All righty. Ms. Bolton, please present the February 20th, 2020 Finance Committee report.
Thank you, and I want to thank board staff for putting this together for us when we have 2 committee meetings on a Thursday and they have to get the other packets and everything ready. I appreciate them doing this. We started with, as we have for well over a year now, a presentation by our governmental liaison folks, Mr. Glover and Mr. Kearney, and of course the dialogue circulated totally around the whole voucher issue that is now swirling in Columbus, as well as the validity of the state report card. The assignment that we're asking the board to agree to tonight is to have the recommendation of the superintendent, our government liaison folks, to craft a resolution to be sent to the state legislature regarding the voucher position and also the validity of the report card. And we know that this is time sensitive, and we've given to the superintendent those pieces of information that she can forward to the government liaison folks. Besides talking about them, the superintendent also shared with us and the committee the priorities that she and the leadership team have put together based upon much of the dialogue we've had over the last year as a board and in finance, and also their views as to what would be most helpful for our lobbyists, let's say it, to help get things out of Columbus that would help us. Standing in for the treasurer, Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting, reported on the monthly revenue and monthly expenditures, as well as the CRAs that came about this for the month of January. and those are cited in the minutes, as well as the CPS tuition assistance for CPS preschool expansion. We had also a report from the Preschool Promise Financial Director regarding the Preschool Promise monies that are there and what was going on. And our own member for early childhood, Ms. Vera Brooks, also presented our enrollment numbers for our CPS schools, as well as the percentage that are receiving assistance financially. We then worked a bit on the February work plan items, and our internal auditor also told us that we would be holding off a little bit more on reporting on the audit or the CAFR, and a lot of that will come up in the audit committee on Wednesday. Proposed calendar year 2020 new work plan we had, with the help of the not so incapacitated treasurer, developed a proposed draft for a new work plan, which included previous work plans, the ad hoc recommendations, the strategic plan recommendations, and the bylaws. And I think the committee members are reviewing that for the next month, and we will be able to take action, as well as the administration reviewing it. We'll be able to take actions on that. We are bringing to the board another assignment, and that is to move forward with a resolution tonight regarding a resolution of necessity for levy renewal that encompasses the preschool promise that will be appearing in the November ballot. Opening discussion, something Member Lindy began this discussion. I think it's very relevant and important, especially during budget times and in the strategic plan period, which is an early discussion to be developed as we go per student expenditure amount and ways to determine, categorize, and ultimately compare and measure the impact of those dollars. So that was really good, and I think both the administration, internal auditor, and Treasurer Wagner, I think we're very interested in pursuing that, and we talked a little bit more about our financial dashboard. We have also tonight, coming from finance, at the recommendation of the administration, a purchase of the property resolution on the west side to speak specifically to immediately preschool expansion, but also down the road it could be regarding other items as well. But that's later in tonight's presentation. We then had the discussion that we need to bring back to the board tonight, and that is how to further continue the presentation and reporting by our government liaison folks as to whether or not that should continue at Finance Committee, or it should be a whole board piece, or more particularly that it should be a monthly reporting to the Superintendent Administration, and perhaps have board members attend those meetings if they are interested. But that's something for tonight's discussion. The rest of the minutes are the 3 pages of those pending or soon-to-be pending pieces of legislation up in Columbus, and then also the proposed work plan for the Finance Committee moving into this coming calendar year. I submit and hope for approval.
Thank you. Do board members have questions and comments about the finance report?
Yes, I do.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
Yes, I wanted to add, and most of you probably received this email today from OSBA, but as this resolution is being developed by our governmental liaisons, OSBA and the other state groups, BASA, WASBO, are asking the board, our board, to include in our resolution support for Senate Bill 89. And that would center around, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in Senate Bill 89, but particularly of interest with regard to vouchers is that the voucher funding not be reliant on local tax dollars, but rather the voucher money come from state dollars to the schools. So I would like to add, as not part of the minutes, but as part of the consideration for Mr. Kearney, that we do that, if that's the board's wish. And that also Governor DeWine is going to be weighing in on this decision. And we, once we approve this resolution or vote on it, hopefully approve, that this resolution will also be sent to Governor DeWine.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Bolton?
Madam Chair, knowing that the time is of the essence in the governor's meeting on Wednesday with the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, we will not convene again before the resolution in order for us to vote on it. So would like to see if there's a way that maybe General Counsel, maybe this is an assignment too, can figure out a way to expedite it. Perhaps it's not a resolution, maybe it's a letter that wouldn't have to be voted on, but we could all sign it, including the superintendent and the treasurer. So if we can, kind of adjust that from a standpoint that we can't pass the resolution before Wednesday, but perhaps there could be a letter delivered before or on Wednesday.
Okay. Please give that consideration when we get to assignments. We did this similarly with the previous resolution, I believe, where we sent a letter. So, okay. Thank you. All righty. I need a motion to approve the filing of the committee reports.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay, does anyone have any kudos? Mr. Messer.
Yes, I'd like to give kudos to a man named Timothy Brooks. And Mr. Brooks is the president of the North Avondale Fathers Group. And this year, they've evolved an annual event that they have had in the past, which was Donuts with Dads. And I think it was very smart of them. They called it Donuts with Grown-Ups. And I have never seen so many parents. It was almost like perfect attendance. It was packed in the gym, wall to wall. And there was an energy in the room. And I think that, the Fathers Group, which I'm happy to be a member of, but I wasn't on the planning committee, they were there, crack of dawn, set up. They welcomed every person. I saw parents meeting each other, and it just really gave you those warm fuzzies about what school should be, bringing families together in addition to our children, along with our principal and the staff there at all levels in the building. And, that Fathers Group really has made an impact. And Mr. Brooks, I really like the change to the Donuts with Grown-Ups because it expanded the reach.
Thank you. Any other kudos? Mr. Lindy.
I wanted to just offer a thank you to all of my fellow board members, and Carolyn in particular, for my first 2 months up here. Everybody has been extraordinarily welcoming and available for all of my questions. And I particularly want to just thank you, Carolyn, for your leadership and for helping me get started. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other kudos? All right, we'll move on. Ms. Bates, do we have any retirements?
We have 2 retirements, members of our civil service personnel. Becky Arcaro Day and Maureen Davis, both paraprofessionals, are retiring, and we thank them for their service and wish them well in this new chapter of their lives.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Okay, we are now at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak, and Ms. Hughes will be our timekeeper. When the buzzer goes off, your 3 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. When your name is called, please come to the podium to speak. We have 2 speakers, so I'll call both names. Clint Bourgeois, I'm sorry if I mispronounced. Okay, Bourgeois. I took French, but I kind of lost it many years ago. Rosalind, I can't read that. Howland. Okay. Havlin, come on down. Yes.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Clint Bourgeois. I have a kindergartner and a 4th grader at Pleasant Ridge Montessori. When my wife and I moved to Pleasant Ridge in 2006, we really didn't look too closely at the schools. We chose the location because of the close proximity to our jobs in Madisonville and Bond Hill. And also because of Pleasant Ridge's walkable and, at the time, affordable neighborhood. Fortunately for us, Pleasant Ridge Montessori had a group of very dedicated parents who chose to put their children into the neighborhood school after it was rebuilt in 2008 and build that school up instead of sending them to an already established and successful magnet school. The school at the time, when the rebuild happened, was not doing that well, but things have improved immensely in the last 12 years. I love PRM precisely because it is our neighborhood school. I drop my kids off at the school in the morning on the way to work. I see many of the other parents doing the same thing every day. That has helped build the relationships that keep the school parent groups motivated and functioning. When we have evening meetings, I do not have to drive across town. The meeting places are within a mile or so. PRM's success the last 10 years has been one of the reasons that Pleasant Ridge neighborhood has seen real estate prices on the rise. PRM has drawn families into the neighborhood specifically because of the school's reputation. This has caused an enrollment problem at PRM. The school was designed for 550 students, and the most recent enrollment figures that I've seen were over 700, according to one of the members of our LSDMC. A number of solutions have been floated, most recently changing PRM into a magnet school. I understand the benefits of becoming a Montessori magnet. Controlling the incoming population makes it easier for Montessori principles to be applied. Unfortunately, if our school adopts the magnet model, as has been suggested, I fear we will lose not only our local parents, but also the diversity that our school has, not just our racial diversity, but also our economic diversity. We draw students from not only Pleasant Ridge, but also Amberley Village, Kennedy Heights, and Gulf Manor. I believe PRM is a good model of what an equitable education can look like. Is it perfect? Nothing is. But PRM is a good example of what a local and diverse elementary school can look like. When solving the enrollment problem at PRM, I hope the decision makers look at how the decisions affect those with the weakest voices. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
You guys all have my written statement, and I'm not going to go through all of the information that's in my written statement, but there are a couple of things I would like to add. I am here as a representative of a much larger parent group who's frustrated with the administration at the school for the creative and performing arts. They're not transparent in their communication, and they're not open in their communication. We've had several instances of parents in my group who have contacted the principal and or the vice principal with no response. They enacted a new tardy policy about a couple of weeks ago, and out of that entire group, I am the only one who has received a response, and that is because I called the superintendent's office. And immediately after that, I received a response not only from the principal, but also from the assistant principal. The tardy policy has been created and enforced without any official notice to any of the parents. We haven't been given any part of this tardy policy in writing. We don't know what it is. And the discipline is severe, all the way to removal, with no accommodations given to any student. So we need some sort of venue at that school where we, as the parents in a group, can address the administration and our concerns. And that is all I would like to say today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamlin. Okay, so we'll move on into our presentations. And Superintendent, please do us the honor of the first presentation.
So the first presentation is a bittersweet one. And so this is a presentation acknowledging the hard work, the championship that we have received from our partner, GE Aviation, but most specifically from Pat Zerby. She has been a true delight and champion for our kids for a number of years. And so we have a resolution, the board has a resolution acknowledging her for her dedication to our kids every day.
Ms. Zerby, would you please come down to the podium? Go ahead.
Okay, so I will go ahead and introduce the resolution. I had the chance recently to meet a woman who's moving here from Amsterdam with her family for a job relocation. And she said, "Your schools are really incredible. And I have to say, coming from outside this country, I was a little surprised to see that I was moving to Cincinnati and I keep hearing the schools are really good. And I think Pat Zerby's a perfect example of why we have that reputation and why we can say that to people who move to our city and to people who choose CPS from across this district. So we will propose a resolution tonight celebrating the retirement of Pat Zerby.
Ms. Bolton.
Thank you. Hey, Pat. Whereas Pat Zerby recently announced her retirement from GE Aviation, where she has worked for almost 14 years as GE's Senior Manager of Public Relations, Ms. Zerby's collaboration with Cincinnati Public Schools has had a lasting impact, and she has greatly enhanced CPS students' experience, especially in learning about science and technology. And
whereas in 2006, Ms. Zerby helped to secure a $20 million college-bound math and science-focused grant for Cincinnati Public Schools. The GE Aviation grant is still the largest non-governmental grant ever received by the district. By fostering school, business, and community collaboration, the grant enabled sustainable improvements to student test scores, to closing achievement gaps, and to increasing students entering college. And
whereas in 2015, Ms. Zerby spearheaded a project to bring the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum's Explainers Program to Cincinnati. The program used technology to connect CPS students with the Smithsonian's rich archive of artifacts and stories about science and technology. Thanks to Ms. Zerby's leadership and GE Aviation's support, online explainers could conduct live, curriculum-aligned science lessons for students through interactive video conferencing. And
whereas Ms. Zerby helped to foster countless other connections between GE Aviation and Cincinnati Public Schools. Examples include GE hosting students presenting their capstone projects at the GE Aviation Row Learning Center, inviting GE employees to serve as math tutors at Evanston Academy, and introducing GE aircraft engineers to students at Aiken High School to start an annual tradition of launching a weather balloon to take pictures of the curvature of the Earth. These are just a few examples. Ms. Zerby's creativity and compassion, combined with GE Aviation's generosity, has left a lasting legacy at every CPS school. And
whereas Ms. Zerby has been a constant advocate and supporter for Cincinnati Public Schools and the business community. She has rallied Cincinnati's business leaders to support CPS initiatives and paved the way for many Cincinnati businesses to become more involved in the schools by creating partnerships, hiring CPS students, and partnering with CPS schools.
Now, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education thanks Ms. Zerby for her generous support to Cincinnati Public Schools and wishes her the very best for a long and well-deserved retirement. Congratulations, Ms. Zerby.
I would just thank you. It's a privilege and a blessing to serve Cincinnati Public Schools and its students, its administration, and its board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. It's been moved. I need a second.
second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Not surprisingly, I have a few things to say, and I'll keep it as short as I can, but I will say, one of the reasons Aiken High School exists is because of the GE partnership. 12, 13, 14 years ago, it was ready to be torn down. And GE was able to help save that high school and raise that high school I appreciate it. I also think that we have to emphasize that we have really depended upon GE and Pat Zerby and the other leaders there, frankly, to state our case to the Chamber of Commerce and to the CBC. And when indeed it was a difficult time, we turned to GE to at least give us a fair hearing with the business community, and I appreciate that. I also want to say, and I think it's very important that you also offered great GE Scholars programs at Aiken and other places. Your help is mentioned with Evanston, but I would also say, as a new board member 12 years ago, it was the GE grant of $20 million that made this district look at itself and reconfigure itself and aim towards the excellence that our current superintendent continues to aim for. It was fundamentally a reorganization, a relook, a reshaping that began with that grant. So thank you very much. A lot of what's happening today falls to GE and particularly to you, who is the translator from that corporate structure to the real world out here of education. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, once again, I'm sorry, I didn't see you all. You gotta yell at me.
Just quickly, Pat, we have not had ever, I cannot remember ever having such an active liaison with any organization than you. I mean, it's been unprecedented. To personal one-on-one meetings, to coming to our board meetings, you know, being present with our students. It's just been incredible, and you know, your shoes are so big to fill. You're going to be deeply, deeply missed. And I must also say, I really, really like her because she's a hockey mom. Her son and my son played at the same time, and that's how I first, there you are, okay, John and Griffin Bates, right? And that's how I first got to know you. So I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss meeting with you and, of course, your service, but I can attest to how awesome retirement is. You're going to have such a lovely time.
Mr. Lindy.
I can be very brief, but Pat, when I was moving back to Cincinnati about 9 years ago, you were one of the first people who would sit down with me. And I've always appreciated your openness, your candor, and your advice. And I want to say enjoy a well-earned retirement, and thank you.
Mr. Messer?
Yeah, you know, I think lots of companies want to do good, and actually a lot of companies would do good, but it takes somebody to be the difference maker. And I have definitely seen that in my short time in getting to work with Pat, because it wasn't necessarily what I knew about Pat, it's what I had heard about Pat. So thank you for all you've done for CPS. I think the resolution speaks for itself. And just a side note, it's kind of like the mafia around here. Once you're in, you're in. So just because you're retired just means you've got more time to be with your friends here at CPS. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then one final comment, Ms. Zerby. It didn't take me long to realize that you were a great supporter of CPS. It was the first meeting that I ever had with you. And I still remember that meeting and the great conversation that we had, and I knew that you were a supporter. And for that, I'm really grateful, and I've learned a lot from you, so thank you so much. Thank you. We like these kinds of things, so we are going to move forward with our second presentation, Superintendent. Did we vote? Ms. Superintendent.
Yes.
I neglected to have the vote to pass the resolution. Okay. We want to do that. Okay, Ms. Hughes.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morowski?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes, most important thing, so I'm glad. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay, so tonight I would like to provide a presentation to the board and to the audience
giving an overall summary and update to our work since August of this school year. Board members, you have a summary of this document in this a couple pages, a 5-page, 4-page document that gives you the summary of everything that I'm going to talk about this evening. So if I had to come up with a headline for this presentation, it would be to discern the vital few things from the many trivial things. And so we are really focused as an administration of really keying in on what are the vital few things that we can do that will have the greatest impact. And so we're focused on impact as opposed to activities. Tonight I'm going to talk about a lot of different things, but when it boils all down to it, it comes to people. It's about our children, but not only about our children, it's also about their families, our communities, and it's about our staff members. In addition, it's about strategy, which equates to future. So it's about the future, looking forward. And as I said before, a major focus on impact. So when I think about the implementation of the strategic plan, as an administration, we've decided and used research to identify 5 core areas in which leadership will do its work as it relates to leadership. And that's on selecting leaders, building an organization, coaching and holding people accountable, looking at a multifunctional perspective, developing and executing on a strategy. And so I'm going to go through each one of those this evening. So in terms of selecting leaders and building the organization, there are 2 major components. The selection of strong leadership capabilities, and then building the organization through empowerment, effectiveness, and accountability. And so as we look at this particular area, when I think about the work this school year in selecting leadership team as it specifically relates to the performance leadership team, I think about the decision to move from an operational position to the chief strategy officer and being able to identify someone on our staff who was really ready to make that next leap. And so a high potential Sarah Trimble Oliver. And so in just a few short months, Sarah Trimble Oliver has had so much impact in terms of quality improvement, in terms of building a scorecard aligned to the strategic plan, and a dashboard to measure our quality improvement projects. So she has been incredible. As I think about empowerment and effectiveness and accountability, we are very steeped in the idea that we first have to offer support before accountability. And so when I think about that, we are guided to our work that we've been doing with Q12. So Q12 is a product of Gallup. There are 12 questions in which, when these 12 questions are answered, it can identify how engaged an employee complement is. And so there are 12 questions that center around your basic needs, your individual needs, your team needs, and then growth. And so some of the questions are related to, I know what's expected of me at work. I have the tools and resources to do my best work every day. Someone at work cares about me as a person. Someone has talked to me within the last 6 months about my progress, and I'm encouraged to grow and develop at work. Our engagement work is really centered around creating belonging, which is different than inclusion and diversity. It goes a step further to help people enroll and be a part of and have a place at the table. And so that's what we're aiming to do, is to create a sense of belonging. Let me go back to here. So central office completed, all central office employees completed this survey. This year was launched for all central office employees, and we have the results broken down by department. Each department lead was given their results, and they have developed an action plan of how to address 1 to 2 items on their scorecard for Q12 to identify, to improve those specific areas. And so we have those plans that are moving in place. We will also launch another survey in May to measure the results. The idea, quite honestly, is not that we necessarily improve the results so much, which is what we want to do. It's the learning that needs to take place to truly engage our employees, and so that's the work that we're really interested in. Again, this is about impact and not doing a series of activities. As we think about excellence and building that excellence, we are pointed to our work around quality improvement, where we identify our aim, our global aim and our SMART aim, which says from X to Y by when, and then the population, and then those conditions that have to be in place in order for us to reach our aim, and then testing each one of our interventions to identify what to adopt, what to adjust, and what to abandon. And that's how we do our work. We've also, in terms of building the organization, have developed process maps with swim lanes so that we can pinpoint, first of all, identify what is the process that we want to use, and then when there are failures, we can pinpoint exactly where the failure took place. This is not about a blame, but it's really about shining the light and making what's invisible visible so that we can significantly improve our processes so that we can provide better service to our schools. As we look at our work aligned to the board's strategies and priorities and goals, each one of our performance team leaders, as well as each department, has a PGSM. And so I wish Pat Zerby was still here because I stole this from Pat Zerby at GE. And so as you can see, we are taking the best of the best work from a lot of different industries. In a spirit of transparency, Board Member Messer introduced us to Q12 as Johnson & Johnson uses it. The matrix, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, we've received that information, that learning from GE. The quality improvement work we were able to attain from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So we're picking out the best in the industry and then implementing those things within our district because, as Sarah Trimble Oliver has said many times, we are not a mom and pop shop. We are close to $1 billion enterprise, and we need to behave as if we are. So each department has a PGSM identifying their priorities aligned to the board's and 3 goals, and the strategies that are going to be put in place to reach those specific goals. The budget is then aligned to those strategies. So I always say, and I'm not the first to say it, you can find out what people value about what they spend their money on. And so we're aligning the budget to what the board has asked us to do in terms of the identification of your priorities and your goals. We're aligning all of that work, our goals, our priorities, our structures, our strategies, and our budget. The next section in terms of our leadership is around coaching and holding people accountable for the work. And again, it's important that we coach before we hold people accountable. It's also important that people understand what the expectations are. And so that's why Q12 is so important. And hopefully you can see how all of these things are woven and are tied together. As we think about coaching, we have a coaching model, and I'll share that with you in just a couple of moments. But as we do this work, we look at the will-skill matrix, and we integrate this into our work as well. So, for example, if someone has low skill and low will, we know that we need to be very directive with that person. If someone has high will but low skill, then that's an area that we need to guide. If they have high will and high skill, then that's something you delegate. And if they have low will but high skill, then you need to excite. And so we use all of this data and this research as we do our work. So this is the coaching. There are 2 coaching models that we are using within the district at central office. And so we're starting our work at central office and getting ourselves together before we go to our schools and say, here's what you should do. So we want to make sure that we're not hypocritical and we're doing some of these things ourselves first. And so we have the GROW model, in which you identify your goal, reality, options, and then wrap up, as opposed to someone coming in and the monkey jumping from your back and you say, okay, well, here's a solution for you. We're working through, thinking through solutions together. And then there's the instant payoff method, where you identify the problem, what's your ideal situation or outcome, what's the blockage, and then brainstorming what are the ways to resolve. Again, we're really working extremely hard to put systems and processes in place which help us with the execution of the strategic plan. In terms of accountability as it relates to evaluation, each leadership team and actually all of central office administrators are evaluated twice a year, in December and then again in the spring and May. There are 3 goals that each person has. They are from X to Y goals. Sarah Trimble Oliver talked about those earlier in the second half of the school year in terms of laddering all of those goals up to the strategic plan. And then we have 6 competencies, which are behaviors that people are measured against as well. So 2 components, the actual goals, and then the competencies. The competencies are built out for leadership team, directors, managers, with a scoring guide that says what it looks like at each level. Does it go beyond managers? And individual contributors. In terms of thinking about a multifunctional perspective, we have been very strategic in making sure that we are all aware of what's happening within the district and the impact that one decision makes on another and how we need to integrate our work. And so the performance leadership team, as well as the directors now, we do huddles twice a week, and those are video conference huddles. Mondays and Thursdays, we're on the phone, we're talking about operational things. Not strategy, but operational. What took place over the weekend that we need to be aware of, any building issues, transportation issues, and so those are the things that we focus on. And then on Tuesdays, leadership team, we have our weekly strategy meeting. So we're not working on operational things then. We're really focused on the intentional strategy of the district and also report on our QI projects. And then on Wednesdays, we have our one-to-one meetings that I have with them. And then on Thursdays, we're back on a huddle call, talking about the operations of the district. So we're pretty tightly knit in terms of communication, speaking with one voice, and moving as one single unit. As we also think about a multifunctional perspective, we have the matrix, which we adapted from GE in terms of breaking down our schools into 4 units or areas, and each area is led by a director of school leadership under Deputy Superintendent Ahmad's leadership, and then there's an entire central office team that meet on a weekly basis to break down what are the issues for this grouping of schools, and then to be able to resolve them very quickly. The very nice thing about this is that each person who sits on one of those teams, if you're in the HR department, then you get back together with your HR team member and you say, here are the things that I saw in my group. Here are the things that I saw in my group. And it goes on, so that we're no longer solving issues for a subset of schools, but then you start to solve district-wide and systemic issues across the district. This year, we also implemented skip-level meetings. And so that means that I meet with the directors, and we have very specific topics that we talk about, whether we're talking about Q12, the evaluation process, or the implementation of the strategic plan. PLT, they meet one level down with the managers who report to the directors. And so what we're working on is clear line of sight from the board to the strategic plan down through the organization of central office, and then we'll roll this out next year for our schools as well. So we're trying to make sure that everything that we're saying that comes out of the work that the board has asked us to do, that we're seeing it at all levels of the organization here at central office. And then there's the development of the strategy. And I would point to our strategic plan, the development of that, and thinking about the competitive edge. There are a lot of things that we can improve on within our district, but there are some things that give us a competitive edge. Our wide variety and offering of school choices, whether we're talking about elementary or high school, our career tech options, our CLC models, our gifted students with disability, English language learner services, our athletics. We have a large array of offerings that, quite honestly, the schools around us cannot compete with, and that's what gives us our competitive edge. So we have the development of the strategic plan at the vision of the board last year. You know that we spent an entire year working with the board, and I truly appreciate all of the pushing that the board gave us and all the iterations of this plan that we had to make, because it really has made for a much more robust and comprehensive plan. But there's the execution of the plan. And as Sarah has said to me often, Ernst & Young has said that 67% of strategic plans that are written in the United States never make it to execution. That is not the case for CPS. We are executing on the strategic plan by identifying the vital few things as opposed to the many trivial things that we could be doing. So when we think about the execution of the plan, quite honestly, it's all the things that I've talked about. Our priorities, goals, strategies, measures, and budgets, our QI projects, our scorecards, our skip level meetings, all of these things are under the work and the foundation of the strategic plan. So we are making sure that that plan is being executed on a daily basis. Again, it's about clear line of sight. So all of that is needed to be able to deliver on the strategic plan goals. And so here are the 5 major areas. And I will say that in terms of thinking about the outcomes, earlier this second half of the school year, Sarah Trimble Oliver provided a presentation giving red, yellow, green on our scorecard. Tonight you're going to receive the actual ratings and scores where they are available. And so I put on at the bottom of this screen lead and lag indicators, because for some of these measures, there are lead indicators. So that's information that we currently have. And then there are some indicators that are lag indicators that we won't have the information for a while. So for example, ACT scores, that's a lag indicator because we don't yet have that information. But there are some things we can point to right now to say either we're trending in the right direction or there's some improvements we need to make. So I pulled these right out of the back of the strategic plan. It's also aligned to the 4-page document that I gave you, which is a summary in terms of student achievement. I'll just highlight a couple: acceptance into the 3 E's, preschool, English language learners, and students with disabilities. So we're using our crawl data, and here is the actual target that was set for crawl scores in terms of improvement. We're looking at a 10% increase. And so you can see that we have a 2.2 at this moment. But please, again, remember that the data that I'm giving you as it relates to any scores is related to a January assessment, with the exception of the crawl, which was at the beginning of the school year. I'm sorry, it's not the crawl anymore, it's the KRA. We are using currently MAP indicators to be our lead indicators. So that's an internal, it's not developed internally, but it's an internal assessment that we give that's not reported to the state, so that we can kind of do a dipstick measure to see where we are. The lag indicators come across in the ACT and the state assessment results, which we'll have in the summer and then finalized in September when the state releases it. But as you can see for 3rd grade mathematics, for English language arts, here is where we were in January in terms of 49% of the students meeting or exceeding growth. So being very transparent in where we currently were at this time. And obviously we have measures in place so that we can improve it, our results. It's also important to know that this is not a direct correlation to the assessment the state assessment. In 6th grade English language arts, we're at 54% in January meeting or exceeding growth. And that information is all in your 4-page summary that I've given you. And then this is English 9, so you can see where we are with 33% back in January. This is the area that we have a lot of focus and a lot of attention, including reading specialists who are now within some of our high schools to work on this. Then we move to math. There are lead indicators again and lag indicators. The lag one indicators will be our results when they come out in the summer. 3rd grade math, 55% in January. 6th grade, 58 in math. Algebra 1, 40%, exceeding or meeting in January. ACT, our students took the ACT, is it this week? Tomorrow. Tomorrow. So we do not have any lead indicators in terms of results. So we'll have our lag indicator will be once we get the results back from the ACT. But you see some of the things we're putting in place to be able to help our kids be more successful. All right. Advanced placement disparities. This is also called out very specifically in the strategic plan, and you can see that we are looking at the enrollment of our student complement who have access and can take advantage of advanced placement courses. You can see the increase that we've had as of, it'll be March, in terms of the number and offerings that we have for our young people. You may remember that some years ago, we put in advanced placement courses that are blended learning, where we have a teacher to go to those schools where there may be only a few kids who actually qualify, to make sure that we address the equity concern. In addition, the Cincinnati Women's Club is in the midst right now of fundraising money to support girls in STEM AP courses and a boot camp this summer. Next, we're going to talk about and switch to career credentialing. And of course, we have to wait, and we'll have lag indicators on the number of points that kids actually earn in terms of credentials. It's based upon the assessment that they take in the spring. So this is a lag indicator in terms of our kids improving the number of points earned, and then the number of kids who are gaining more industry credentials. So I will be doing another presentation and an update in September when everything comes in, everything is finalized. And then our graduation rate. So just keep in mind that the graduation rate is a year in the rear. So on the report card that we get in September, the graduation rate will really be for the class of 2019. It's always done a year behind. So we already know what that graduation rate will be. It will be 79%. And although we obviously need to do a lot of improvement, we want 100%. 79% is considered a D on the report card. At the end of the day, all of this is really about our kids being accepted into a career pathway, either enroll, enlist, or employ. And so this graphic breaks down where kids have identified for this year's graduating seniors, where they anticipate being, and we're now going about confirming whether or not they're actually enrolled, employed, or enlist in the military. The elimination of district-level policies, programs, operations, and practices that do not support diversity and equity. This is something that we will always continue to work on like a dog on a bone in terms of this work. We do have some equity groups who have formed and are engaged in the work right now. We also anticipate bringing in a national consultant to work with us to really help us comb through all of our data when we talk about academic achievement, disparities, discipline, and offerings for our young people. So this one is something that we'll be just like a dog on a bone, constantly working on. This again goes to racial disparities, which is part of the reason we're bringing in an external consultant to work with us to help us see some of the things that maybe we haven't seen or haven't acknowledged. And so you can see the work that has been done, but again, we know that we've come a long way at the board's leadership or with the board's leadership. We also know we still have a long way to go when we talk about disproportionalities with our young people. Again, this one highlights a way that we're addressing the gifted services and enrichment services for our young people. So I'll just bring back to mind, and for the audience who may not know, several years ago, the board discovered that as they were looking at the data in student achievement, that a large majority of the kids who are getting into gifted services were not children of color. And it isn't because they aren't smart, but the assessment that is given is basically a reading test. If you haven't gone to preschool, or if you don't have the language development, it's going to be hard for you to be successful on this assessment that's given in second grade. And so we looked at the data and discovered literally thousands of minority children who fell literally just below the gifted range. And so at the board's direction, we opened the Spencer School to offer services for those kids who are gifted, but also those kids who fell just below the gifted range. And those kids who fell just below are also receiving instruction from a teacher who is gifted credentialed. So we're very excited about that. Also, that school is an extremely diverse school. It is about half and half in terms of race. And so we're very excited about this piece. And so this, again, was at the leadership of the board. And so that's the type of groundbreaking work that we want to be able to repeat throughout the district. We're also very much interested in looking at the gap for our students with disabilities and our gap for our English language learners. And there was some groundbreaking work that was done last year with Assistant Superintendent Susan Bunty in terms of closing the gap from what we would call typical kids and our students with disabilities and our English language learners. And so we're constantly looking at how can we close that gap between them so that our kids really do have an equitable education and access to opportunities. And again, this one is centered around closing the gap. And all this information, the numbers, it's captured right in your 4-page document. And again, this one is about English language learners closing that gap as well. When we looked at preschool, which is where it all gets started for us, we've had preschool, high-quality preschool for over 20 years in our district, but we wanted to make sure that we could increase the instructional days for our preschool students. We were able to do that this year, increasing our days by their school year by 5 days. There were some extra days that teachers traditionally had to do some work and go out and make home visits to our parents. We found other ways to do that so that we could make sure that our kids were in school more days receiving high-quality education. So that highlights that. That whole section was student-centered decision-making. Now we move on to health and safety. And so this is really focused on critical safety incidences, our alternative learning centers, social work intervention, social and emotional learning, and parental and guardian consent. So we've looked at our data, and we look at this on a regular basis. We have scorecards that we have developed and are continuing to develop about our critical safety incidences. And so we are at a reduction compared to where we were last year this time. And so this one relates very specifically to a weapon. We have been able to increase our alternative learning centers within our schools. So this isn't ISS and school suspension. This is a calm down, bring it down, refocus yourself within our schools. And so we've been able to increase that across this year. But again, we aren't just about increasing and doing activities. We know that 65% of them are meeting and exceeding what we're calling best practice. We need to get the other percentage to make sure that not only do we have these centers, but they are high-quality centers as well. School social workers. In the past, school social workers have primarily worked on attendance and truancy. We added attendance clerks this year so that our school social workers could really work on social and emotional learning of our kids. We're going to be increasing that school social work complement for the upcoming school year. Eventually, we want to get to a one social worker to each school, and in some instances, more than one, depending on how large the school is. We're running quality improvement projects as it's relating to social and emotional learning. We scaled from 3 schools to 8 schools, and we'll continue to build those out. This is in partnership with Children's Hospital. And then I'd like to be able to highlight the fact that 80% of parental and guardian consent forms in 10 of our 14 health department school-based health centers have those forms in. And so we're working to get 100%, but this is a dramatic improvement from previous years. So parental consent allows us to be able to offer treatment to our young people. Without that consent, we cannot do it. All right. Community engagement and influence. So this one is about resource coordination, family and parental organizations, and customer service. So the plan and the measures in the back of the strategic plan call for us to be able to add 10 new resource coordinators for the upcoming school year so we can get closer to all of our schools having a resource coordinator. And we are significantly revamping the resource coordinator role in CLCs within our schools, updating it with our new strategic plan. The board also expressed an extreme interest in making sure that we had more organized parent organizations in our schools. And so this year we were able to add an additional 8 schools, and you see the 8 schools listed, and we'll continue to build those schools out that have structured, organized parent organizations under the leadership of Assistant Superintendent Susan Shauna Murphy. We have too many S's. We have Shauna, Susan, and Sarah. So many S's. All right, next we go on to optimize capabilities, and this has a major focus on quality improvement, procedures and process maps. The procedures and process maps, as well as quality improvement, I highlighted in the first section under leadership, and then also the employee engagement. So 100% of our departments and schools are running some level of a quality improvement project. The directors of the departments are presenting their quality improvement projects to leadership team. So we will have a group of them present tomorrow and a group of them presented last month. But performance team leader members present on a weekly basis their run charts, their data, and the progress that's being made, or quite honestly, sometimes the progress that isn't being made, so we can figure out what to do. Okay, so this data relates very specifically to our Q12 work around engagement. So the survey that was given, the Q12 survey that was given to central office revealed that 32% of the employees are engaged. And so we want to improve that engagement through the plans that we've developed that I mentioned earlier around those Q12 questions. There will be another survey that will be given in May, but that won't be the end of it, because we'll pick up 2 additional indicators next year depending upon the results for each department. Growth. So I must say, this is the area that I was concerned about the most, being able to grow the district. Sometimes it's a little hard to control how many kids come. Well, we are seeing the district grow basically by a school a year. So our target for this year, and we did not shoot a low target, but it was to grow by 398 kids. We have grown by over 500 kids net. So it's a school a year. Our preschool target for this year was to grow by 177 additional students. Since August, we've grown by 308 students. And here's a chart that shows the enrollment over time. You can see it broken down by 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and then the total. So we sit at 1915 this day. So that is our current enrollment, 1,915 students. Our lag indicator will be to see where we are at the end of the school year. And then the new school that we opened this year, we did not count Cairns because Cairns was already in the works, but Gamble Elementary Montessori in December of last year was not even a thought, and we were able to get that school open in a matter of months, and it is doing extremely well under great leadership and anticipating opening 4 new classrooms next year. So that concludes my update that gives an analysis of the leadership work that is needed and required to implement and to deliver on the execution of the strategic plan, along with the measures to outline our work to date. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Messer.
Thank you, Superintendent. You know, I said this when we went through just the scorecard. I'll say it again here. This is the data that I just, I wish there was an easy way to get it to the average everyday Cincinnatian who says, what's going on with CPS? And, you know, I think we are in the people business, starting with our children, but then all the people that surrounds that, but in my opinion, most importantly, our employees being one of the largest employers in the region. And what I see in this plan, which I don't think is common in public entities like this, definitely wasn't common in people I kind of met at OSBA from other districts, this whole concept of engaging our employees is really going to ignite the talent we have in a very different way, I believe, that is just going to accelerate performance. You know, and I also, you know, get very frustrated. I hear, oh, every child deserves to go to a high-performing school, and every child this, and we got to make sure all of our schools are doing this. And I think that specific section, I would pull out and kind of review with those people where those specific criteria, I know you gave the summary, but you also have that kind of broken out where there are specific metrics and plan. We're not just waiting till they graduate. We're looking at all these other steps along the way. So I say kudos to you and, of course, your entire team. I think Sarah was a great addition to this whole process, but thank you for leading a high-performing organization, because it is going to pay off in the success of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lindy.
Thank you. I think, first of all, thank you for all the work that went into preparing this. And I think that I'm a big believer in the importance of staff engagement. And I think it's just very, very exciting to see the work that's happening with Gallup. And I've heard you say this before, but if the team and the people aren't bought into doing the work, it's never going to happen. I think it's great, and I'm very excited. I also think it's so encouraging to see just such clarity about indicators. This is exactly what winning looks like for each piece of the strategic plan. I find that very motivating, exciting. I want to say thank you. There's no but coming at the end of this. I think that's great. I had 3 questions, and I'll just share all of them, and then you can decide. We can chat now or at a future meeting. So one is, it seems, I'm trying to figure out what we could do around a better lead indicator for ACT scores. Because it stinks to have to be in a position where you don't know if you've won until it's too late to do anything about it. I was a middle school teacher, not a high school teacher, so that's outside my expertise, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what a future state could look like. Second, I'm trying to size how we should feel about the 49% meeting growth targets on MAP. I can't tell if that's great or that's a disaster or somewhere in the middle. We'd love to kind of hear your thoughts about that. And then one reflection I am having is that it's so long and there's so much that's in here. I'm interested in when we set the scorecard for next year to see if there's an appetite to get this down to a smaller, more manageable number of most important outcomes. And I'm not clear on what the timing is for that as we go through a year together. So those are my 3.
So in terms of, so let me take each one. We've talked about as a team what might be some good lead indicators for ACT. We have not landed on anything, quite possibly PSAT results. We use that to identify potential for advanced placement courses, but we do know that we need to find something, and so to give us an indicator much sooner than the kids take the assessment. In terms of the MAP results, what you're seeing, quite honestly, is average growth. Is that fair?
That's correct. Compared, it's a national norm test.
So we would like to improve and do better.
And we can actually use the map to predict as well on ACT because it's all achievement based.
Okay, thank you, thanks. In terms of smaller number, so there are 28 indicators in the back of the strategic, see, it makes me stutter. There's so many, it makes me stutter. But there are 28 indicators at the back of the strategic plan, and those are all the measures that I summarized in this 4-page report for you. But we are focused on impact, not the number of things we can get done. So I appreciate that, your comment.
Other questions? Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I think the thing that makes this historic and important and actually kind of clear is the fact that because it is based, if you will, on the strategic plan and implementing and having success with it, I think it becomes clear because the community did develop the strategic plan.
Yes.
The broad scope of it, even many of the specifics are things that the community and stakeholders said we wanted, and then we left it to the professionals to figure out how to be more specific and also set the targets. It isn't an internal you know what I'm saying, it's not it's an internalized plan and scorecard, but it actually was developed externally. So it makes sense for the citizens and students alike more than it normally would, because it is community developed and driven. The other thing I would say is the reference regarding the policies and the equity piece. From an earlier discussion when we were talking about policy committee, that is a role that policy committee could additionally play, is the review of not just our cyclical review of policies, but with the administration's help, looking at those policies that somehow are not born of pursuit of equity, because there's a bunch of them still, no matter how much we cyclically go through them. Even the language there's not necessarily equitable language. So I would just keep that as a thought as we try to figure out some of the things that need to be done. I appreciate the support, and I know you're already moving very fast and furiously into accomplishing a lot of it. All of you are. Appreciate it.
Other questions or comments? Great. Thank you, Superintendent. Very detailed, very comprehensive report. Okay, so let's move on. Under board matters, the placement of governmental liaison assignments and reports. That's Finance, Ms. Bolton.
Yes, it's a discussion that actually informally began or was put forward at our work session, just briefly towards the end of that work session. And it is also in the keeping of these responsibilities that all the committees have, and also in the interest of finding ways to be more efficient and use the time most appropriately. And then also with the assignments that have gone to finance based upon the ad hoc recommendation, which included at least the growth piece. It's been discussed in committee a little bit in January and then this month about whether or not we can or should continue the discussion regarding our government liaison folks, Mr. Glover and Mr. Kearney, reporting to finance rather than reporting to the whole board, or recognizing that they also now report on a monthly basis to the administrative team. The committee, we don't really vote in committee, but we try to reach consensus. Our committee has not been able to reach a consensus about this and wanted to bring it to the board for advice and hearing as to what we should do. I'll let Mrs. Bates make the case, but part of it is that it's taken so a long time to get our administration, not this particular administration, but previous administrations, and the district to properly fund our advocacy and our lobbying piece, and knowing that we need to be in Columbus, and often we do Washington, D.C. as well, and other organizations to which we belong. Advocacy is critical, and so the committee sees the wisdom of making it, some committee members see the wisdom of having the reporting of the liaison folks go directly to the administration as an administrative committee where board members could attend if they cared to. And we'd have to have some guidance from general counsel as to what that may entail to be legal. And some believe strongly that it should remain in public as a part of the finance committee responsibilities, and some believe it should be a full board, or some believe that it could be continuing an ongoing memo from the superintendent via the superintendent from the liaison folks. So we wanted to open it up to what the consensus of the board was, rather than us try to figure it out ourselves.
Ms. Bates?
Yes, and I'm the one who had the opposing opinion. I'm not in favor of moving the legislative reporting solely to the administration. Now, you did see the legislative program that was developed by the administration with our government Relations liaisons, and that is totally appropriate that the administration develop that. As Ms. Bolton said, it has taken years to get the attention of the administration that this is a priority, that we are not part of Kentucky, we are part of Ohio, and we should be in the conversation in Columbus. It was the board that hired and interviewed the governmental relations folks that we have now. It was our initiative. And we all know if the board has something on the agenda, that's what gets attention. Not to take away from this administration certainly has been the most attentive since I've been on the board to state legislative matters and the most active. But I don't forget the years prior to that where it was not a priority and we had very little say in Columbus. Our board takes the action via resolution on legislative matters. So I believe it's very important that at least the committee is very well versed on legislative matters so we can bring resolutions to the full board for discussion. I'm not in favor of the full board doing this. As you know, it's already almost 8:30, and if we had to have legislative reports here, we might be here till midnight. And but I am in favor of keeping it in the Finance Committee. It's also the board members who have taken on the role of visiting our delegation in D.C. Ms. Bolton is active with the legislative part of NSBA, as I am with the Council of Great City Schools, and Mr. Morawski has been as well. And we are the ones who make the visits to our legislative delegation while we're attending our conferences, legislative conferences in DC. So I believe it's really important that at least some of the board, and as part of the committee work, be very well versed in legislative matters. I also believe that the superintendent and the treasurer should be meeting with our governmental affairs liaisons to discuss how this program is being implemented and to give direction. But I do believe that the ultimate oversight is appropriate to the board, and I believe the most efficient way of doing that is through the Finance Committee.
Mr. Morawski,
Do you want to go first? Because I know you have to leave. Do you want to say
do
something?
you have to leave? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, and I have to drive 4.5 hours north of Detroit tonight, so I am with you that I don't necessarily want to expand these meetings. But my wish with the government liaisons, having worked with them for 2 years on the Finance Committee, was I felt like we were very much on the reactive, and we would get an update and say, this bill is coming, and then we would then do a response, and then we'd get that one, and this bill is coming, and then we do the response, and that type of thing, versus really being proactive about if we were to say 5 things should change in the state, and here they are, and this is what that would look like, and we kind of put them to work. And I think that would be time well spent at a board retreat. Obviously, the administration could they've probably cursed out a few things that they wish were changed tomorrow. Gosh, if we could just figure this out. Gosh, if they just change this. And we would, I think, need somebody to really just project manage that body of work. Because, you know, the updates, while they were good in finance, it was really just a recital of what was in that report. And I wanted to get to a little bit more of the proactive, and we kind of started tiptoeing, and I think it was schedules. But my preference would be that we align on some very specific strategic legislative topics and issues that we as a board feel are a priority, and then put them out to hunt on those with our local elected officials and get updates on that. And then simultaneously, as things come up, we might have to respond. But perhaps once the board aligns on what those legislative priorities that we want to accomplish, then maybe someone from the administration would be the kind of project manager, direct liaison to make sure that the work is kind of going on, and perhaps even just providing the update to the board monthly or something like that.
Mr. Morosky?
Appreciate it. Thanks, President Jones. So I have a couple questions and comments. And I guess one of my first questions, and it's going to sound naive, probably because it is. And Mr. Glover and Mr. Kearney are both great, and I love reading about the updates from the Gongwer report in finance, and that's nice. But it doesn't. It's nice. Are they government liaisons or are they lobbyists? I guess it's not a bad question.
That's, well,
Okay, so I
we
guess
don't
my,
know,
and
yeah.
I guess this is a different way to word sort of what Mr. Messer was saying, really, is that I'm fine with it being in committee, perfectly honest. Finance committee's fine, other committees fine. I think committee makes sense, my initial opinion, and in public, to Ms. Bates's point. My concern, I guess, is different, and it's more along those lines of the proactivity versus reactivity. And if we have full-time lobbyists or government liaisons, again, with all respect to Mr. Kearney and Glover, they do a great job for us for what they're being asked to do. And I guess the conversation I'd be interested in having is, what are we asking these folks to do? Because having somebody full-time in Columbus throughout all of the voucher thing, for example, would have been great. It's hard for us. I know we all would love to be up there full-time, or whatever the issue is right now. That's the one that's top of mind. Or somebody who's full-time in Columbus reminding people we're funded unconstitutionally, like literally every day, like poking people in the forehead, lobbyist. So that would be kind of where I would land. I'm fine with the structure as it is now. I just think conversation, I think, would be an interesting one, is what that role could be.
Well, I'll chime in here. I actually think there's important roles for on both angles. Clearly, this board is very involved in high-level legislative work, and we have to continue that. That's, in my opinion, is the oversight that we provide. I do think for me personally, what I miss is sort of the immediate kinds of work that need to happen. And so in some respects, I think having administration give more attention to what's going on a day-to-day basis and all of that, and keeping us informed would be more helpful. But the Finance Committee would still maintain the general oversight. And so clarifying, well, what is the liaison's role, and then what is the lobbyist function? And how do we manage that piece, or how do we balance that, would be important for me. So I guess what I'm saying in a nutshell is, I think there's, maybe there needs to be some clarity around the kinds of things or ways that administration would work with them, and then what we would work. So we need to maybe have that conversation. Yes, sir.
I just want to put a pin in that. I just think this is the right conversation. I think that's a good conversation to have, and I think it's, when I saw it on here, I wasn't quite sure what it was on, but I was glad to just see that it was on there. And, you know, if this board matters item ends up opening all these other ways to, more nuanced ways to talk about this role, I think that would probably be important, especially as we continue to grow, as we just saw in the superintendent's report. And there are other forces out there that want to pick apart at our growth, and it would be helpful to have someone playing defense in Columbus and offense.
Mr. Lindy.
Yeah, thanks, President Jones. I just want to say I agree with everything you're saying. That I think that if we could somehow have our lobbyists working more closely with the administration, we could move faster and let us be more aggressive with what we want to take on. And I think it sounds like there's a way to do that and create public accountability and line of sight by having some committee function. But the way I'm hearing that is that you know, more of like the decision-making authority rests with the administration, and we can provide oversight and ask questions and public line of sight and all of that. But I love the idea, and that's it.
Any other thoughts, ideas? Ms. Bolton?
If it were to stay in finance, I think what would be good is what the administration's worked out, which is a plan. That there be that we live by that plan, and that rather than the overview of what's happening in Columbus, which is important, but more important for the administration to know, but maybe that the liaisons or lobbyists or our advocates, let's say that, speak to particular parts of the plan, rather than the overview of everything that's happening or like the long list here. They have great insights. They're both incredibly respected and experts in doing this. So we're happy about that, but maybe it's a better way for the Finance Committee, if that's of interest, since the superintendent and the treasurer serve on finance. It might be a way to direct the reportage to the plan that the administration has, and on occasion, since General Counsel is part of this effort too, as is the PR, public affairs people, maybe we can say that a particular part of the Finance Committee, not necessarily the first or 30 minutes or 40 minutes, because we so enjoy talking about all this, that maybe there's a way to organize it so that it remains in the finance, the administration keeps pushing it, and the advocates are directed, if you will, by the plan that the leadership has developed.
All right. Okay. Well, what is the will of the board? I mean, what I'm hearing is there are definitely some different roles. What we're recommending, based on that, is the administration could direct I heard you say direct the reportage of the plan. We need to define the liaison versus the lobbyist versus the advocate, whatever it is that we want them to do. And probably then what becomes our role at that higher level, if that's in fact what we decide. So it would still be the oversight of the Finance Committee to do it, but then the administration would direct the plan as you define it.
Right, and then that's what our report that we would get in finance would relate to the plan.
Okay.
So
Does
that
that-
would be the way that the administration could be briefing us as well. And then that way, they actually are implementing it here and directing our advocates there.
Okay.
So that would be a lot easier for the committee if we want to still do things effectively and really have the administration running the show.
Right. So it really wouldn't be like the government liaisons or whatever they're called, sitting there for a half hour
Right.
reporting out on what's happening in Columbus. It is what's happening with the plan, what are we getting accomplished, how can we support it, that kind of thing. Okay. Yes, Superintendent.
So I would like to find a way to get clarity from the board as to your specific priorities. So we identified a set of priorities, but I want to make sure that we aren't missing any that the board might have of interest. And so things like charter school funding and Ed Choice voucher and transportation and facilities funding and the state report card. So those are types of things, and I'd be happy to share that with everyone, but I'd love to get your feedback.
Okay. Ms. Bates, followed by Ms. Bolton.
Right, I also believe that a big part of this is education, and receiving reports once a month really isn't going to be sufficient. We would have our priorities, and our priorities could change in a minute when the legislature meets and throws us another curveball. So I would be in favor, of course, of the administration directing this. I've not had an argument with that. The Finance Committee providing oversight, but what we have been lacking in this district, and I'm not sure if we have that, is since actually Kent Cashel, which has been ages and ages ago, is somebody, as I believe it was it you, Mike, saying that's really dedicated and was it Ryan, focusing on legislative matters. The superintendent it focuses on so many matters, this can't be your number one priority. And I'm not sure who on your staff you could delegate this to be as a priority, but that would be very helpful, especially in educating us as these matters come up. Right now, and it's important. I mean, we receive our updates from OSBA, and that is really important, as we did today with the support of HB 89. But I think identifying somebody, I guess it was Ryan who called it a project manager, it would be the corporate speak, but somebody who is more dedicated to being a legislative liaison and making this a priority. I could see how it could easily fall through the cracks with all that you and the treasurer have to do.
Ms. Bolton, you had your hand up, I believe?
No, I think that
Is that-
works. It gives us
Okay.
enough direction that it's sort of like the internal auditor kind of thing, that who's actually implementing, who's actually the report to. It's really the superintendent or whomever the superintendent appoints. It's not a report to us so much, or that we're overseeing. We're kind of overseeing what the superintendent and the administration's doing, and their communication and plan. And I would say that I think the document that the superintendent's referring to, which is the plan, is included in tonight's minutes for finance. So that we can start at that point as we begin this calendar year.
Okay, sounds good. We all good? All right, we can move on. All right, Mr. Morosky, please present the following resolution.
My pleasure, Ms. Jones. I would like to present a resolution amending Board Policy 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. I present the resolution as written.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
Yes.
Ms. Bolton?
I mentioned it to the policy chair before we began, and maybe it's just the old teacher that I am, but I completely agree with this paragraph being somewhere. But I don't like it where it is placed.
I get it, yeah.
It just is, this policy is the holy grail in this district regarding instruction and regarding what we, securing equal access to our children and our staff and what have you. So I would really like, if it's possible, to send it back to policy and find a better place, even if it stands alone, or put it in facilities somewhere rather than in this. I would also point out to it, just that language about equity, the wordsmithing piece in paragraph D of the policy proposal. District support, verify the like aspects of the district program receive like support as to staff size and compensation. The term like it's not quite saying same, but that terminology is not equity language. It's actually pointed to as an example that you don't have equity. If it's because something, there's 300 here and there's 300 here, it's like. All of our schools are so different. And so a lot of that's fine tuning, but my preference would be to keep what you're doing here totally, but please find another place for it.
Ms. Bates?
And along that line, I mean, the title, Non-Discrimination and Access to Equal Educational Opportunity.
Yeah.
It should be equitable and not equal.
Federal government hasn't caught up with us yet.
No, but we can call it what we want. It's our policy.
You're not
Yeah.
going to get an argument from me.
Okay. Yes,
And
Ms.
change that throughout as this is mentioned.
Sure, so we
Consistency.
will put this on the policy agenda for March 20th, not March 6th, for March 20th. And then, Mr. Hoying, if you're making a note, then I won't have to do an assignment. So policy 2260, we'll go through and look at all of the wording where the word equal and the word like appear, and perhaps consider changing those. And then for our new paragraph F, private location for nursing mothers, we can probably find a better place to put that. So we'll shelve this and then we'll bring it back after March 20th.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
So moving on, Ms. Bowers.
Yes. I have before me a resolution amending Board Policy 5751, parental status of students. I present this resolution as written.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Ms. Bates?
Yes, again, back to the non-discrimination proposed policy, the addition of the private location for nursing mothers, why would that not be more appropriately placed in the policy we're currently discussing?
So this one, that piece was added last year when Ozzie was policy chair. So the only thing that's changing in this are the two words participation in. So, but that was the piece that Board Member Bolton brought up, that it probably belongs elsewhere.
But F on page 2 of the non-discrimination policy, the red line, private location for nursing mothers, wouldn't that be more appropriately placed in parental status of students?
It is. That third paragraph, that's the one that we added last year when Ozzie was chair. The third paragraph on the parental status of students.
So,
No, it's under, I'm referring to the non-discrimination in access policy.
Right.
That we just
Okay,
sent back
got
to
it.
committee.
I'm with
Look
you.
on the second page, look at F.
Yep, I'm with you.
Shouldn't that be more appropriately placed in parental status of students?
Yeah.
Because we have,
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that there is a paragraph in 5750 that discusses that. The issue with F is that it's for everybody, contractor, volunteer, employee. I think that's what Ms. Bolton was saying, that moved. Because there's like a version of F is the last paragraph of 5751, unless, I mean, you're suggesting we just take F and excise employer, contractor, volunteer, and put that in lieu of the third paragraph of 5751.
yes, and then have, yes. And but to your point, we should keep that F here to ensure that employees, contractors, or volunteers have that
We're gonna find a
opportunity, but but then to your more recent point, have it instead of the third paragraph so that it's in one place for one policy, but make it specific to students.
I'm lost, me personally. So I think that one policy refers to anybody, and then this one refers to students.
Right, but the wording should be the same, shouldn't it?
It is, though. I mean, if you look at F in the last paragraph, it's in 51, it is the same, it's already the same wording. It just doesn't include contractor, employees, volunteers,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah. So I think what I hear is that maybe we need to cross-check them to make sure that we are actually talking about the population that this policy is about. So there may be some word.
Yeah, with all due respect, I disagree because we've done that, and the third
Okay.
paragraph, 5751, is clearly about students who may be mothers. And then the F, though, I mean, Ms. Bolton's right. I don't think F belongs where
Okay.
it is. It needs to go somewhere else and be in a whole new, because it's so broad. But I totally see what you're saying, but I do think that this paragraph, if you look at it, it's the same wording. And also, I think probably have noticed that wording is not made up by us. It's federal law. So Mr. Hoying took the words exactly.
I'm good with that.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Are you okay with that then, with his explanation of that?
So we can pass this the way it is, but then
Yeah.
look at F otherwise.
Okay. All right, so the policy 5751 that's currently being presented, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? Thank you. Ms. Hughes, please call roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer? Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
President Jones.
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Bolton, please present the following resolution.
Thank you. This is a happy occasion. Hopefully, everything goes well with this one. Resolution to purchase 3120 Mozart Avenue and 3610 Higbee Street in Westwood. Whereas the Board of Education of the City of Cincinnati, blah, 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 is committed to responding to the district's growing enrollment by creating additional high-quality educational seats. And in order to meet rising demand for high-quality educational seats within the district, representatives of the district engaged in discussions and negotiations with representatives of City on a Hill Incorporated, an Ohio nonprofit corporation. And then after the negotiations, or as a result of the negotiations, it was determined that, and the board is being asked to, the district will have until 45th day following the date of the agreement to either terminate the agreement or receive a refund of a $10,000 earnest money deposit, or proceed to close on the purchase of the property with 15 days after the end of the due diligence period, with the earnest money deposit applied to the $1,250,000 purchase price. I introduce and vote for a second and passage.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? And just as a point of clarification, you mentioned earlier, you were sharing with the public that this was developed, we're working on this to do the preschool piece on the west side.
Yes.
I think that's important to know.
I appreciate that the resolution says quality seats, which I think is a wider effort, but at least initially, as has been described to the board in a previous undertaking and discussion, that this is beginning to answer some of the needs that we have on the west side.
Great.
Regarding preschool. We know there'll be preschool classes there, and in the future, there might be additional things happening as a result, but this also helps adjust some of the preschool locations that already exist, as well as merely adding to it. So this is a very exciting time.
Thank you.
Congratulate the administration on finding the property.
Thank you. Ms. Hughes, please call roll.
Mrs. Bates,
Aye.
Ms. Bolton,
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers,
Aye.
Mr. Lindy,
Aye.
Mr. Messer, Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
and President Jones.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Lindy, please present the following resolution.
Superintendent has,
I'm sorry.
If I could just say one thing on that, on the last resolution, I would just like to highlight for the board that Mr. Steve Hodge, who is the person that actually helped to find that location after being on the job, a month and a half. So I just wanted to highlight him and thank him for the fabulous work that he's doing with Robin Brandon and Susan Trimble Oliver.
Great.
Sarah Trimble Oliver.
Yes.
So thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Mr. Lindy.
Thank you. I have a resolution declaring it necessary to levy a tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation, and I present the resolution as written.
Is there a second? Okay, discussion? I don't have anything, I'm obviously in favor of it, but it just shocked me that it was coming up so fast. So we're there, right? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. That's all I wanted to say. Anything else?
Maybe just,
Yes.
just that this is for a renewal of the tax levy passed in 2016
Right.
with no ask for an increase. This is a renewal of what voters passed in 2016.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Hughes, please call roll.
Mrs. Bates,
Aye.
Ms. Bolton,
aye.
Mrs. Bowers,
Aye.
Mr. Lindy,
Aye.
Mr. Messer, Mr. Morosky, and President Jones.
Yes. Thank you. Superintendent Mitchell, do you have a report?
Yes, I have a very quick report. I always like to highlight our students. So tonight I'd like to highlight our career and technical education. We are truly passionate about this work because at the end of the day, this is what we're preparing our kids for, life beyond CPS. So I wanted to just highlight all the wonderful things that are happening as it relates to getting our kids ready for that life after CPS. 3 key messages. This is really about career preparation. It's also about access and opportunity for our kids, and also making sure that our young people have the relevant curriculum that will prepare them for the workforce of today and tomorrow. So February is Career Technical Education Month. We have within our district over 3,000 students who are enrolled in career tech courses. We have 20 career tech programs that are available, spanning idea or concepts around agriculture, culinary arts, information technology, health and science, public safety, and the list goes on and on. For those of you who don't know all of the wonderful things that we have as it relates to career tech within our district. And that concludes my report in addition to the written report. I would like to just say one other quick thing about a staff member as we go into the actual superintendent's recommendations. Wanted to just bring to everyone's attention that one of our current staff members in accounts payable, Loretta Cornett, she passed away last week. She went into the hospital with the flu and was placed on life support and passed away last week. So condolences to her family.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the superintendent?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I
Ms.
have just a question, or maybe it's a statement regarding the presentation of the school year calendar. I think it would be wise for somebody in administration to explain how the development of the calendar occurs, largely because in the schools and elsewhere and families, why did the board make the calendar this way? Is a question we get from usually anybody who doesn't like the calendar. The reality is we don't make the calendar, and we have less participation in it than we did 3 years ago. We get something that is already done, and I think it is a contractual committee, and I just would like somebody to state that so I can tell my neighbors to listen to this review of the tape or whatever.
Yes, so as our HR director makes his way to the podium, we do have a committee that is focused on the development of the calendar. It is set 2 years in advance. We do have an amendment that we would like to make to the calendar. The committee is made up of CFT representation, so Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, as well as administrators. And so, Paul McDowell.
Yep, sure. Glad to answer those questions. As Superintendent Mitchell said, it is a joint committee. It is made up of CFT members, administration. We also have CAS representation. All of our unions are invited to participate into the conversation. I believe what we are bringing tonight, we took to Student Achievement Committee, is just a change on how we wanted to implement the calendar for next year. But we do try to approve 2 calendars out, so that way our families, our parents, the caregivers of our students are aware of the calendar well in advance.
Would also like to say that there's a lot of time and effort. I used to serve on this committee many years ago that goes into this. So it isn't just kind of willy-nilly making up, but we actually, the committee, they look at the number of instructional days within each quarter, within each semester, and so try to balance all of that out while also keeping in mind any professional development opportunities that we might want to have for our staff members.
Thank you. Does that answer
That's
your
fine with
question?
me.
Okay, you could tell your neighbors now.
I'm
That's
telling
it.
my neighbors.
Okay. All right. So did we call a vote for that?
No.
Okay, Ms. Hughes, please call a vote.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye on everything except recommendation 3.
Mrs. Bowers? Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Morowski?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye on everything, nay, except for Roman numeral 7, nay.
Ms. Hughes, welcome to our board meeting.
got that, Ms. Hughes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Morowski?
Yes.
And President Jones?
Yes, thank you. Okay, any inquiries and updates? I believe, okay, as Mr. Hoying is making his way up to the podium, we'll go ahead, Mr. Morosky.
Gonna say update, it's Public Schools Week, so happy Public Schools Week to everybody.
Thank you.
And I'm very excited that our child will be born on Public Schools Week.
Yay.
Little Mo.
Just to update, he announced it earlier, but he and his wife are expecting their baby at any moment. So he's already informed us that the month of March, he will not be with us, so congratulations,
I will miss
Daddy.
you all, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Hoying, we invited you up to just give us an update on where we are with the tax levy negotiations. We understand that they're wanting some response, and we just really haven't had an opportunity to really dig into it a little bit. So if you could give us an update on where things stand.
Yeah, thanks. This is on the abatement agreement. We had the meeting with the city solicitor and her staff on Friday, so on February 21st at 3 o'clock at their office. We have a number of points that we're still discussing with them. I still need some direction from the board at some point on the length of the agreement. As you recall, City Council passed an agreement that could range in length from essentially 6 to 8 years. It's until expiring December 31, 2025, or expiring December 31, 2027. So those are the sort of the range that City Council proposed. From the city administration, I understand they don't have a strong preference between those. So it really, I think, is up to you in terms of the length of the agreement, or at least that's my sense.
Okay.
So a few other points that we're still working through with them.
Okay, okay. So we just really need to sit down. We have a meeting next week.
Right, on Monday
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Yes, Ms. Bates. Ms. Bolton.
We have, is our next meeting the March 2nd one?
Yes.
I don't know if everyone, I'm sure everyone got particular calls today or since the Friday meeting. And if you could repeat what our position is, as you understand it, that would help us. I mean, length and percentage. I mean, what is it that we are insisting upon? Because I think they seemed, I guess, surprised and, whatever.
So point one, to the extent that there is some need to review this still, we have made very clear to the city that our intent is not in any way to hold up any projects that may be currently under consideration, and that they can send those to, while we work out this global agreement, they could and should send us any kind of agreements that are currently underway, as long as they have the 33% reimbursement, pilot reimbursement to CPS. We would ensure that those get through. For the global agreement, there's a couple of points. One is we still need to work out the term, and again, need some direction from you on that. Second, there's some issues just to make 100% sure, and this is the point I made to the city on Friday. I'm not in any way recommending that we expand the types of agreements that get pilots under this new agreement. I want to make sure, however, that we continue the status quo, that there's not projects that they try to essentially avoid getting us a pilot on. At this time, for example, one of the discussion points during this debate was whether residential projects should get pilots or not, and I'm not proposing to you that we extend this to residential projects. But the city mentioned several times publicly that if they didn't get an agreement, they would start giving pilots to residential projects that were 3 units or greater, which they never have in the past. I want to make sure that they're not going to, that the city is going to insist on pilots on the same types of projects that they have under the previous agreement, under this new agreement. And I didn't see strong opposition from the city on that. I was told that programmatically they are not planning any changes. But the language in the former agreement did not protect Cincinnati Public Schools very well, very frankly. And it's my intent to make sure that this new agreement, again, not to hold up any individual projects at all, but that the global agreement protects Cincinnati Public in a way that perhaps the former agreement did not, without programmatically making changes or without altering the status quo.
Okay, other questions?
Where's the risk that you see? Do you think they're going to add?
The way the agreement's written now is unless you have a statutory ability to object to the project, they can award whatever abatements or incentives that the city wants without insisting on that the developer paying a pilot. And so if for example, the city changes its position with respect to residential projects that are 3 units or greater, I really don't want to litigate that. They say they have no intent to do that, and so it's my suggestion that we include that in the agreement to make sure that the status quo is maintained.
So the 3 units or more would count as commercial?
That's how we've defined, that's how, under the former agreement, yes, that's what the threshold that the city was using.
Okay, so I think the board, we need to go back and take a look at that, because I think I had a couple questions, but just hearing Mr. Hoying speak to it, I think I need to go back and reread and then be prepared to ask questions that make sense. So why don't we do that and plan on really hashing this out next week? Monday. We don't, so I'm guessing that you let them know that we hadn't made a decision about it tonight, so they weren't expecting a decision tonight, or do you know?
Again, I've said any projects that they have pending, as long as we're getting the 33% pilot, we will shepherd those through. But for the global agreement, I've asked for, again, we just met on Friday for the first time, that would they give us an opportunity to review the agreement and make some suggestions.
Okay. So I'm just based on, the questions, I don't think we're going to make a decision tonight. So we'll maybe come back next week after we've looked at it and we can have a chance to, again, talk about it when folks have read it again. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other updates, inquiries or updates?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Bolton.
Couple things, just 2 things. Update to the superintendent. The Civic Garden Center has expressed at least an informal interest in being a lead agency at one of our schools, and they have not expressed any particular preference, and probably would need to know a little bit what that entails, but they are very interested in doing that, especially with the expansion of the green piece and the whole ag piece and what have you, so I think that's good. And then just for the board and administration, again, want to thank Connie Solano for continuing to work on the report card reform committee, which had its largest meeting last week, where we had about 55 individuals and about 32 districts represented to continue to hear the presentation and to further the authorization for the work group to continue.
Ms. Bates?
Yes, I have, I guess, an inquiry and an update. One of the Cincinnati Recreation Centers, Clifton, offered ACT prep for students. And I asked at the Cincinnati Rec meeting, where did that come from? I mean, one of the director of that rec center took it upon herself to obtain training and resources and offered it. Well, people are like asking for more. They're interested in when she's going to do it again. Is it going to be at other centers? And I got with Dan Betts and I asked him, you know, what are they going to do there? And this looks like a potential partnership for CPS and Cincinnati Rec because of the interest. So his ask was to give him the name of someone in our, you know, on your staff that can work with his staff because they have the facilities, they have people that, you know, obviously have the interest, and there's definitely interest in the community for this.
But I would ask for Deputy Superintendent Tiana Mott to be the point person. ACT comes under her bailiwick.
Should I let Mr. Director Betts know this, or will you be in touch? Either one's fine. I can copy you on the email. Okay.
Anything else, Ms. Bates?
That's it, thank you.
That's it, okay. I just wanted to make a comment. Ms. Bolton mentioned about the work continuing about the state report card. And on Saturday, I attended the OSBA, the first meeting of the year, and Ms. Bolton's name came up as a force to be reckoned with around that state report card. So I just thought I'd share that
That's
we
nice of
really,
you. Thank you.
we really appreciate that. And I say that because it sounds like that this group is really moving forward with some pretty progressive recommendations around the state report card, and everybody seemed to be pleased with that. So, Ms. Bolton, thanks for your work.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, assignments. Yes, Ms. Bolton.
Madam President, I hope you help me remember this. We have assigned the government advocates with the help of the administration and what we've submitted to the superintendent, kind of an emergency letter regarding the voucher. And to Mrs. Bates's point, the endorsement of 89, if I recall correctly. Also, absolutely, with the copy to the governor, especially our folks, but most particularly the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate and the governor who are meeting on Wednesday. Assignment for General Counsel and the administration to review the zoning that speaks to community learning centers, as well as the urban agriculture initiative from City Council that might make it possible for us to more properly use the Rawson House, which some community members have suggested that that house and farm be named for John Gilligan. And so it's not a school, but indeed it goes in the keeping with Community Learning Center effort, which is part of his legacy and that board's. And another simple one, real quick for the administration, looking at all of the minutes from the 4 committees, it'd be great to see if indeed the entire strategic plan has been assigned to various committees, at least as possibilities, because it appears in all 4. And a quick look looks like everything's covered, which would be good. So and then this from policy committee to finance. It would be great for finance because of the growth effort to get from you all that ODE issue regarding capacity, the study that they did, because for us to talk about growth, we'd probably have to know about the capacity piece, and the administration has to figure out capacity, if it's any different than what we already list. I don't know what all that entails.
Phyllis, or Pat, could we just get that in the finance packet, that ODE memo that we have, that we talked about in policy, that's in the board office? I can shoot you an email, but we can just get it. Would that be helpful?
Perfect, yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
Okay. No other assignments, right? We had a discussion earlier, but I think it was mutually agreed that it would go back to committee. So, all right, anything else?
Oh,
Okay.
Yes, the student, next time that we meet, the student voting.
Oh, that was it.
text.
I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah.
what it is. She was right. Thank you for reminding me, the student voting piece. And then also, I think we were supposed to do tonight, but at least the next one, I believe we need to have a board discussion on the bylaws. That was,
We are, but I thought we agreed to wait until March
okay.
when all the work plans are done and in. Did you want to comment on that, Ms.?
Right, I had asked Ms. Davis to schedule a meeting of the ad hoc committee by doodle for the three of us to receive the information from the committees, and we had a deadline for the individual
14.
comments to at least put this all together, and then we could present it to the board for comment.
I would say that's a good idea, but I would say too that the part for the ad hoc may not be dependent upon the work plans from each committee, but indeed how the strategic plan has been divvied out. Because it's in so I just think that would be good. Plus, we have to talk about the language proposals as well as the assignments. So it'd be great to have some open discussion about some of the language that's been proposed.
Okay, well,
Either by the ad hoc folks or by the other people participating.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
okay.
And I'm just saying, let ad hoc meet
Right.
first, and then we'll bring it to the board, because it will be a little more organized.
Right. Okay. Anything else? Having no other business before us, I declare the meeting adjourned. Okay.